I've yet to talk to a prosecutor or a former prosecutor that didn't laugh when I said, is that obstruction of justice? Of course it's obstruction of justice. This would be obstruction of justice anywhere. I've seen a lot of Donald Trump's defenders who have managed it by being anti-Trump, and of course now they're defending Barr and becoming far more aggressive for some reason, attacking Robert Mueller. It's really shameful. But again, if you remove Donald Trump's name from this, you can't find a prosecutor,
remove president,
or a former prosecutor that wouldn't say that he was guilty of obstruction, or at least that he would be indicted on those, on some of those 10 circumstances that Robert Mueller brought up, 10 examples of obstruction. And, you know, Judge Napolitano, who is Fox News's chief legal analyst, says the same thing. This isn't close. You have a person that is in power, that is being investigated for wrongdoing. That person uses his position in an abuse of power to try to stop the investigation by getting the investigator fired. And he tries to do so repeatedly. And he actually even fires the first person that's starting to move the investigation, and says to an NBC News correspondent and says to the Russians why he did it.
It was in plain sight from the beginning, before the Mueller report. As Caddy touched on, these are not screaming lefties on this list. These are people who've worked in the Justice Department, some in the Reagan administration, some in the H.W. Bush administration. It's not clear what it means, other than restating the obvious to a lot of people, that there was obstruction of justice, other than to point again at the performance of Attorney General Barr last week, when he twisted himself in knots and bent over backwards to make the case that it was not obstruction of justice, which flew in the face of common sense and also the legal opinions of now 500 or so people who've worked in the Justice Department.
And now they're saying, of course, after hearing all this time, that Mueller could not charge Donald Trump because he's a sitting president, Gene. Now you have people who actually, again, they're just being shameless, and it's really disappointing to me because I've known them and respected them for a long time, but they're just being shameless now, saying, well, if Robert Mueller couldn't accuse the president of obstruction of justice, then why do we want to hear him talk now in front of the American people? It is,
right.
I guess they think their readers are morons, just like I guess Barr and Trump think their supporters are morons.
Yeah, we talked about Robert Mueller for 2 years, waited for his investigation and his report. Why would we want to hear from him in public? Why would we? It's just ridiculous. This, you know, nothing to see here, folks. Shut this down. This is over. This is over. You're going to hear a whole lot of that this week, I think. And you know, from in a certain sense, in the legal sense, I guess it is over, because there's no way that the Justice Department is going to indict this president. But I think it is of historical note and a political note that those now 500 prosecutors came out and put this on the record, that, you know, the obvious. Yes, it's obstruction of justice, and if he weren't the sitting president, he would certainly be spending a whole lot of money on legal advice, trying to stay out of jail. But that is where we are, and the question is, you know, Barr notwithstanding, where does this go from here? What does Congress do with it, and does it translate now into an impeachment process, or does it get adjudicated in the election?
There is, Mike, and it's obvious to anybody that's watching, either in America or overseas, there has become, over the past several weeks, a sustained and an increasingly quickening assault on the rule of law. Whether you look at what Barr did in his testimony, whether you look at the fact that he committed perjury in the House and probably the Senate, and yet Republicans and Trumpists are apologizing for him and saying nothing to see here, move along, when they were the same ones screaming that Bill Clinton should be impeached because of his perjury charges. You have the Secretary of Treasury coming out saying, oh no, we understand there's a statute that says that the chairman of the Ways and Means has the right any Americans tax returns, but we're just not going to comply with the law of the land. And they do it without a second thought. I mean, it's not a constitutional crisis. That's breaking the law. They're breaking the law. You can look at all of the document requests that they've ignored. They're in contempt of Congress.
Yeah.
Democrats should hold them in contempt of Congress. You look at what Lindsey Graham is doing.
And they don't care.
They don't care. The Republicans don't care. So it is. History has chosen the Democratic Party at this point in time to be the only party in America who will stand up and defend the rule of law. The only party. There is no one else there. And as a former Republican and as a guy with a lot of Republican friends, it makes me sad. But this moment in history has provided us only one political party that can stand up and defend the rule of law. And that's on the Democrats. Whether it's the smart political calculation or not, the Constitution requires it.
The Constitution does require it. The politics of it are going to be perhaps dicey, but the Constitution does require it. But to the list that we've been speaking about, I went through it yesterday, and it takes quite a period of time to go through it. There are a lot of names on that list. I knew a few of them. The few who I knew, I called, and I was struck by the common observation that they had. And the common observation they had was that this is not about Donald Trump. This is about Bill Barr, the Attorney General. And the phrase that was repeated to me by two of the people I spoke to and alluded to by two others who I spoke to was, he is a disgrace to the office by his behavior.
You know the fear that we had at the beginning of the Trump administration about him putting in of caddies and yes men to run his administration. There are. But he got Mattis. He got Tillerson. Cohn.
Gone.
And you could look at, he actually put some good people around him at the beginning. Now, you look at Barr, you look at Pompeo, the things that Pompeo's saying becomes actually more disgraceful every day. Yeah. You can just go down the list of them. And he is now, and all the acting secretaries, he has now surrounded himself with the most duplicitous cabinet in recent American history. It is